How's it going, everybody? It is I, once again, Mr. Cinema Junkie. And I'm sorry for the angle of the camera, but I live on a hill. I do. Don't have my tripod. It's buried somewhere in my room. So I have this on the hood of the car. I'm outside. So let's get right into this, shall we? Telling you the story, a little history of my being a fan of the horror genre, which led into me being into the more extreme stuff later on in life. And I'm telling this story, I was inspired to tell the story because of a little story that Slim Pickins shared about how he had gotten the movie Hostel, and he would take it with him to his friend's house, and he had this thing about freaking people out. And I got to tell you, I understand exactly where he's coming from, because it's an addictive quality to control people's, well, not so much control, but to kind of instigate someone's emotions like that, to freak them out, to sicken them, I guess, in some instances, not always. But let's go back a little bit. The year is 1973. I had just had an accident. Stuck my arm. Well, you guys probably don't really remember this unless you're around my age, but way back when the washing machines used to have these things on top called wringers. You take your clothes out of the washer, you put them through the wringer. They were automatic, and they'd squeeze all the water out of your clothes. Then you hang them up on a line or put them in the dryer, whatever. What had happened was the wringer was going, and I stuck my hand in the wringer, this hand in the wringer, and it dragged my arm. My arm was like about this big around back then, and it dragged it all the way up to the elbow, mashed it up real good, bruised it up, and I wound up going to the emergency room, where they gave me some kind of pink medicine. I guess it was aspirin of some kind, and they put my arm in a sling. To get my mind off of it, my dad, who was still married to my mom at the time, my dad suggested we go to a movie, and we went to a drive-in to go see It's Alive. That was officially my first horror movie, It's Alive. But I had no idea what I was watching. I didn't know what was going on in the movie. I know there was a scene where a doctor came out and his face was all cut up and scratched up and stuff because they gave birth to this hideous mutant baby. But I didn't know why his face was all cut up. And I really didn't follow the story very well. And we didn't stay very long because my mom was pregnant with my brother at the time, and she didn't really like the idea of watching a movie about a lady giving birth to a mutant baby. Yeah, it freaked her out a little bit. So we didn't even get to stay for the rest of the movie. So I had no idea what was going on in that movie. So this was not when I became a fan of horror movies, because I really didn't know what was happening. Over the years after that, I would go to see movies like Tommy, the musical with The Who. My mom took me to go see that, and I didn't last 3 minutes because it was too much for my little brain to take in. It was these big, gaudy images and this crazy music and this very strange scenes, and it freaked me out real bad. Didn't like it. Went to Disney World with my uncle. Went on the Haunted Mansion ride, and the first time through, it was great. It was absolutely great. Second time through, didn't go through. I freaked out. Strange to admit that, but I really did. And I think it's because my imagination got away from me. Which happened quite a bit when I was younger. My imagination would just go completely off the rails. So hold on one second. My apologies again. I had to chase a dog off who decided to start eating itself. Anyways, yeah, the Haunted Mansion, I didn't make it through the second time. I had a complete freak out, meltdown. I was like maybe 4 or 5 at the time. So it's really weird to say that, being a big horror fan now, and I know some of my family who was there at the time can't believe that I'm such a horror fan now. Like, you're a horror fan? You could make it to the Disney ride. Speaking of Disney, the movie Pinocchio, when the kids are turning into donkeys, that scene was very scary for me as a child. So yeah, a little traumatic. Anyways, enough of that. The year was 1976. I was 6 years old, and like most kids, I had a set bedtime. And in my house, bedtime was 9 o'clock. But like a lot of kids, excuse the rooster, I'm sorry. But like most kids, I had a hard time sleeping. I couldn't go to sleep at 9 o'clock. So, usually my grandmother would talk me into going to sleep, or she'd give me some kind of a story or something, and I'd fall asleep to that. But this night was one of those nights I just could not go to sleep. By 10:30, everybody else was in bed asleep. So I think it had to have been about 10:45 or so, judging by the timing of the occurrences that took place. I got up out of bed. Now the house is pitch black. All the lights are out. The only lights that are on are from the street, coming through the street. And here comes a car now. Now everybody wants to go to work. Anyways, I got up and I turned on the TV, had the volume way down, and I had never watched TV after 9 o'clock. Never. I didn't know what happened after 9 o'clock. I think the closest I came to that was like the news was coming on and my mom got upset that I was still awake. That was 10 o'clock. But other than that, it was like, no, I didn't watch a whole lot of TV after dark. But I was so used to what I would see during the day, I figured that stuff showed all day. Cartoons in the morning, cartoons in the afternoon, or kids shows and stuff. So I thought maybe there was something like that on. I remember turning on the TV, and there was this movie showing. In that movie, I remember it looked like it was a man and a woman, and the woman was getting very mad at the guy, and I didn't know why she was getting mad. And they were in this big, it looked like a yard to me. I was like, wow, that's a big yard. And this old man came after them and started to grab the girl and attack her. And I thought he was mad because they were in her yard. Back then, you weren't supposed to go in your neighbor's yard. Okay? Just so you understand. I wish somebody would shoot this friggin' rooster. I mean, seriously. Sorry. So, I thought he was mad because they were in their yard. Okay? And then she got away, and I didn't know what happened to the guy she was with. She wrecked her car. She ran into a house. And the movie I'm trying to describe here is Night of the Living Dead, which I did not know that was the name of the movie at the time. Didn't know about zombies. Didn't know this guy was part of the Living Dead. And I saw the movie. I stayed up watching the movie. I think it was just until they found the body upstairs. And that was enough for me. I turned off the TV and ran to my room and jumped in the bed and went to sleep. The images in my head were just kind of like, man, I was very confused. Let's just say that I was extremely confused. I had seen movies on TV like Dracula and Frankenstein and stuff like that, but never really got into them too much. But that movie really tripped me out a little bit. So the next day, I remember the next day at school, I was really tired because I had stayed up late. And I think I was 6 years old, so I was in the first grade. And we had recess, and during recess, I was telling some of the kids, some of my fellow students, about the movie I had seen and what had happened to it. And I'm like, and then he grabbed her, and then she ran, and the whole time that I was describing this, every kid that was sitting around me was like this. And then what happened? And then what happened? And it's like I had a little audience. And they wanted to hear what I had to say. I was a kid nobody really paid attention to. Nobody ever really asked me anything. No one wanted to hear what I had to say. But here, I had about 5 kids. And I had them right where I wanted them. And they were listening to every word. And when I got to the part about the body at the top of the stairs, it says, and their face was off. And they were freaking out. So I knew I was onto something. But after that, they kept coming to me saying, what'd you see last night? And what'd you see last night? And did you see anything else? And was there anything else? And there was nothing else. That was a one-time thing. So I knew then I had to start finding these movies a little more, and anytime there was like a CBS special presentation or, the ABC movie of the week and it sounded scary or something, I would watch it. And I would report back. Now, jump forward to 78, 79. I'm about 8 or 9 years old. And my mom had gone, my mom and dad had been divorced for like 3-4 years already. My mom had gone out to the movies and she saw a movie and she described it to me. And I was so enthralled with her description that I was like, I have to see this movie. She was one of those parents that's like, not you. You're not going to go see it. You're too young to see movies like that. She wouldn't let me go see it. But I would draw pictures based on her description. And I'd show it to her. Was it like this? No, not quite like that. I'd erase it. Try and draw it better. I couldn't draw for crap. But like I said, my imagination would get away from me. So her description was pretty vivid. And I kept begging her, take me to see this movie, please. I got to see this movie. No, absolutely not. It's too much for you. No. Now, my mom, I have to forgive her because she had lived through my whole freak out thing during Tommy and King Kong and all that stuff. So she wasn't going to take me to go see this movie because she knew I would freak out. But I was like 3 years deep into like trying to find all the scary movies I could find. And that one sounded way scary. So, lo and behold, summer came, school was out, and I went to go stay with my dad, which I would do every summer. I get over there. Hey, Dad, how's it going? Good, good, good. He's like, so what do you want to do tonight? I don't know. You guys want to go to a movie? Yeah, I want to go to a movie. Well, find a movie you want to see. I open up the paper. What do I see? The movie she was talking about. And that movie, ladies and gentlemen, was Phantasm. That movie was responsible for me. Up until that point, I had seen scary movies and no problem. This was the first time I'd seen a scary movie and actually lost sleep. I'd stay up till the sun came up. I had never seen a sunrise before. I had never broken night before I watched Phantasm. And the story is really funny. You see, my dad and that whole area that he was living in was predominantly white. I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. My mom's Mexican. So I wasn't around a whole lot of white people until I was around my dad. And there are all these white people in the movie. So I put 2 and 2 together. I'm like, hey, it happened in the movie. It could happen here. Why? Because everyone's white. Yes, white people scared me. So, and his house reminded me of the house in Phantasm only because he had carpeted stairs. And it was a 2-floor house. I'd never been in a 2-floor house before with carpeted stairs. It looked just like to me, it looked like the one in Phantasm. So everything was kind of clicking for me. I was like, man, this stuff is like the stuff in the movie. So for like 2 weeks, I wouldn't fall asleep until well after the sun was up. And then I'd sleep till like noon, 1 o'clock. And I was on vacation, so nobody really bothered me. No one told me that I couldn't do that. But that summer, the summers that I spent with my dad, we went to see a lot of movies. And my dad didn't give a flying hoot what I saw, okay? He didn't care. He just wanted to get out of the house and shut me up and we would go see all these movies. Now, sure, we saw a couple of like meh movies. We saw like Saturday Night Fever and Grease, okay? But for the most part, I'd see Phantasm. I saw Phantasm like twice that summer. I also saw Abby, which is the Black Exorcist. I saw The Watts Monster, which also goes by the title Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde. I saw Jennifer, one of those supernatural type movies where this girl, like, she has control over snakes. Tourist Trap. It was titled, this one movie was titled The Seven Brothers Meet Dracula, but it's more commonly known as The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. It was a Hammer film that incorporated vampires and kung fu. Saw some Chuck Norris movies, but it was a total blast. I got to see all these movies, and I had all these movies to tell my friends, and one friend in particular was my next door neighbor, Naomi. Naomi was into horror movies just like I was. We were about the same age. I think she's a year older than me. And she would go see a horror movie and tell me about it. I'd go see a horror movie and tell her about it. And just having that attention was addictive. It really was. So may she rest in peace. I lost her to cancer a few years ago. So now let's jump forward to about 85. Since 1985, the whole thing about renting VHS tapes had really taken off. We had our first VCR already. We had, a membership to the local video store. And I had seen more than my fair share of horror movies. I was always renting horror movies. Got to see some that I never got to see in the theater before, which was really cool. But I had kind of a reputation with my friends as being the guy who always got the horror movies. And I would try to impress them with the stuff I would get. Although sometimes I would rent some movies that were kind of hit and miss. For the most part, my friends enjoyed them. They liked watching them. A lot of my friends couldn't watch movies like that at their house. So I was the place to go to for the really crazy stuff. Of course, it was the middle of the mid 80s. So I also got a lot of like ninja movies, some martial arts stuff, things like that. But for the most part, it was horror. By this time, I had seen Phantasm, I don't know how many times, but it was quite a few. And then I learned about something. A friend of mine hooked me up with a bootleg of Faces of Death. And that just opened the door to all sorts of craziness. I showed that one to my friends, and they tripped out. It wasn't until years later that I found out most of that stuff was reenacted. But up until that point, I had never seen anything like that before. Now, at the video store, they carried a few things like that, like, what was it, Shocking Asia. And we all tripped out because that was the first time any of us had seen a male to female sex change operation. Yeah, had a lot of crossed legs there. And I was always on the lookout for stuff like that. Of course, I was still seeing, like, I was in the heyday of the slasher era. So I saw a bunch of, like, Friday the 13th and, stuff like that. Wasn't too big on Nightmare on Elm Street, although I think I saw, like, the first 3. But after that, I started getting really bored of that quickly. But there were some, like, darker, uglier titles, like Mother's Day, okay? I mean, when you compare Friday the 13th to Mother's Day, one's a lot grittier, dirtier. There's a whole, like, a rape theme going on. And, excuse the bird. The whole world's against me right now. So yeah, movies like Mother's Day. Maniac was another big one with me and my friends. To me, Tom Savini was like an absolute king in the special effects realm. Hate to say that later on in life I became very disenchanted with him. But again, it was that addictive quality of showing these extreme, well, not that extreme, but a little more extreme than what some of my friends were used to. Watching them weird out, watching them trip out. It was great. It was fun for me, right? Now, let's jump forward to, I believe it was 1994. I landed a dream job for me, and I was a clerk, an overnight clerk at a video store. I started off on a swing shift. I started like Monday in the AM, and then I think it was Wednesday, Thursday was like afternoon to evening, and then Friday, Saturday was overnight. But then they switched me completely to overnight, and I had a ball. Okay, I worked from 10 to 7 every night, and it was like the best job ever. It didn't pay really anything, but at the time it was enough for me to afford, my apartment. I got my own place, and I could get all the movies I wanted for nothing, and rent them, borrow them. I just had to sign them out. But at night, since I worked at night, there were like these really slow periods of time. It was a 24-hour rental place, by the way, and I would watch movies at night. And because of this place, it was like an independent store. It was called Video Central. It was in Columbus, Ohio. Because it was independent, they didn't follow the rules of the other video stores like Blockbuster and stuff. So I was exposed to some really crazy titles, not so much horror, but like art house titles. And but I was also in turn exposed to a different group of video fans who hit me to different titles. Like, have you ever seen this? Have you ever seen this? And one girl in particular who used to come in there every night with her boyfriend told me about a video that her professor told her about a girl who was tied to a bed and dismembered all the way up to her neck until her head was cut off. It was from Japan, she said, and he swore it was real. Now, most people would be like, well, I don't want to watch that. It's real. That's a murder. But me, I was so enthralled by this. I was like, really? Where can I find this video? Oh, it's hard to find it. It's real hard to find it. And I figured, yeah, I guess it would be if it's somebody being murdered on video. So the movie she was describing was, of course, the guinea pig movie, Flowers of Flesh and Blood. Again, you find out that's not real at all. But there's a lot of like stories that surround it where people thought it was real. Also, during this time, I had seen the video Traces of Death, which had a lot of just like crime scene photos, some video archives. It was the first time I'd seen stuff like that, and again, just opened the door even wider. I watched so many outlandish titles at this video store, made connections with other video fans, video files, I guess, and some of them had like a lot of bootlegs that they would hook me up with, and that just opened the door wider for me and got my interest piqued even more. Now, let's kick it even further down the line into the 2000s, say 2002, 2004. That was the advent of my internet days, where it was easy to find stuff to download. It was you could find almost pretty much anything, and that's where I saw like my first Russian execution video, and with the Chechen soldiers, and I didn't know if it was real or not. I at the time I didn't know if it was real or not. I know now that it was real. But it really opened the door even wider to all these movies from around the world and all these different subject matters. And the more I found, the more people around me were like, oh man, that's crazy. Oh, can you get this? Can you find this? And that's what I love doing. That's one of my little passions in life, was to find obscure titles that people were looking for. Haven't done it lately, but if challenged with it, I might try doing that again. I don't know. I try to steer away from downloading stuff. In fact, I'm not going to say I try to. I don't do that anymore. I used to download a lot and rip a lot of DVDs and things like that, because at the time it was kind of like a naive notion that you weren't hurting anybody. What could you possibly be doing wrong? Even though the FBI warnings say a $250,000 fine and or 5 years in prison, at one point in time I was probably sitting on about $250 million in fines and about 5 life sentences. So not anymore. I don't have any of that anymore, and I don't do that anymore. In fact, I'm a huge advocate for not doing stuff like that. Kind of a bummer for some people, but that's just how I feel about it, guys. Bad, good or bad, that's somebody's life work. The only way I would ever advocate watching a streamed copy of a movie or downloading a movie, the only way I would ever say, yeah, okay, it's forgivable, is if there's absolutely no way other than that to get the movie, okay? No way. Or if the only copy that's available is held on by some guy who's trying to bend you over for $500-$600 for the damn thing, then yeah, I'd be like, you really want to see it, but your only option is to A, not see it, or B, fork over a king's ransom. What do? You gotta let your conscience be your guide on these things. So yeah, but I've seen since then, because of the internet and stuff like that, I've seen a ton of execution videos, cartel execution videos, the craziest underground movies, the goriest, nastiest, maniacal stuff, and but then you leave all the underground element behind, and you find legit copies of these movies, and you start buying them like I do, and you amass a little collection, and that's where I'm at now. I don't have the passion that I did for collecting, for getting these movies, but every once in a while I'll strike against I'll strike up a title. I'll see a title and I'll be like, it'll catch my eye, and I'll be like, oh, that looks really good. Now, whether it's a mainstream title or an independent title, doesn't matter. What matters is the content interesting, and does it look entertaining? Nothing is scary anymore. There's no such thing as a scary movie to me. But what it can do is it can intrigue. It can keep me entertained. It can keep my attention, and in some cases, it could disturb me a little bit, which is like the adult version of being scared, I suppose. So, yeah, that's. But bottom line is, I share that love for showing these movies to other people and getting a reaction out of them. I once told my friend Claudia, who I also lost, rest in peace, Claudia, I told her that watching movies that I've seen dozens of times before with the right person makes the movie brand new for me. We saw the movie Wreck together, R-E-C. We saw that movie together, and I had seen it quite a few times. So we sat down to watch that movie, and she screamed at all the right parts. She freaked out. She got scared, and it was like watching the movie for the first time for me. So yeah, it was like, man, it was like heroin. It was such a certain quality to that I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I hadn't had that feeling in so many years because I don't hang around most of my friends, if any of them, anymore. So now every once in a while I'll find some willing soul who I'll let borrow a movie, or I'll let them check out a movie that I have, and I'm always happy when they're impressed by my selection. So I still have that going. But yeah, that's kind of a brief history, as brief as I can make it, of my foray into the horror world and how it grew from there. So I guess the movie that's responsible for making me a horror fan is Night of the Living Dead, the original George A. Romero film. And it just grew from there, people. Just grew from there. Well, I hope I didn't bore you guys too much with that story. It's just something I wanted to share. Thank you, Slim Pickins, for sharing your story and for inspiring me to tell my story. So I'll catch you all soon. I got to do a little editing here because the cats and the animals don't want me making this video. You guys take care, and I will talk to you all real soon.